Hi, my name is Bob Warwick, and we call this series The Docket. We'll be discussing legal issues that affect the borderland and often the country as a whole. Our hope is to present these issues in a clear and concise and understandable format, but as always, I need to make the disclaimer that neither I nor anyone else involved in the program is giving legal advice. These programs are informational only and hopefully will spur conversation about the topics we discuss. For those of you who are new to our viewing audience, I want to let you know that we tape our programs at the El Paso Community College television studio and depend on the college not only for the physical space it provides, but also for the intellectual and educational support it gives us. So thank you, EPCC, and let's get started. Hi, I'm Bob Warwick, and welcome back to The Docket and our second presentation on Medicaid. Today we're going to be discussing how to create trusts that will qualify you for Medicaid and a third type of trust known as a 1301. Again, as our guests, we have Magda Soto and Jennifer Coulter, and I want to welcome you guys back. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having us.
You're always welcome here. So let's start with the first slide we have up here. Magda, would you start, please?
Sure. So today we're going to be talking about special needs trusts, and there's three basic ones that we're going to break into and branch out. But third-party settled special needs trust, self-settled special needs trust, and a pooled trust. Third-party settled special needs trust. So this is created by somebody other than the disabled individual when we're really talking about a special needs trust. And this comes into play a lot of times when we're talking about estate planning. Usually when I have somebody come in, we talk about, first question is, do you have anybody who you want to leave something who is receiving Medicaid, has any sort of special needs? And unfortunately, the majority of the time we'll hear, well, I do have a child who is receiving Medicaid and I don't want to leave them anything. So that's where we start talking about, you know what, it's a really good idea to maybe think about doing a trust. And this would be you creating the trust for that individual that is receiving Medicaid. Of course, you're not going to make that individual have any sort of authority. They wouldn't be the trustee, but this is what we're referring to when it's third party, more like a parent creating that trust for their child.
Now, do you ever get, do you ever get resistance from the parent saying, well, I don't want to go to the expense of creating this, or this is too complicated. I'm just going to leave the kid out or the child out and, say, here, I'll leave him love and affection, and I'll give all my money to my other kids and they'll take care of him.
Unfortunately, very much so. Or we hear, but I know my daughter will make sure that my son is taken care of, and he's the one who's receiving Medicaid, and she can receive the house and everything else.
And there are a lot of downsides to that, right?
Of course. The big thing is you never know who that daughter's going to marry or what the needs of that daughter, her children, are going to be. She could be sued. Anything can happen. And now you ultimately really wanted it to go to your son who is receiving Medicaid, but unfortunately just complicated things by leaving it to the daughter without sort of protections for the son.
And she could commingle that and it could become community property, and then it would even be subject to division in a divorce.
100%.
So really, it's extremely important to explain that to people and explain that a trust gives them all that extra protection. Is that right? So
many protections. So it's always the fear, well, I also heard that there's no way that I can leave something to my child since they're receiving Medicaid. Of course, you can always leave something as long as you plan ahead of time. And doing this, you do your will and you create that third-party special needs trust, or you create it right now, but again, you're planning for the future because we never know what's going to happen, and you're leaving everything in trust or a percentage for that child who is receiving those services. So
you could leave it if you had 3 kids and you wanted to leave them equally, you could leave, and one of those children happened to be a disabled person, you could leave 2 of the kids their money, their share outright, and the one child, the disabled child who's getting Medicaid, would then have their share put into a special needs trust.
Yes. And
do we ever call them SNTs?
Yes. Yes, we do.
For SNTs, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Another nice thing about, of course, third-party special needs trust is you get to decide who would receive anything that's left in the trust when something does ultimately happen to your child. There's no payback provision.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second, because I think another trust we're going to talk about does have a payback.
Correct.
Okay, so what you're saying is when the disabled child, and we're just going to use that because you can set up a special needs trust for anyone who happens to be disabled, but when the disabled child, and really legally they're not a child because they're over 18, but we're talking about your child. When the disabled child passes away, you can then say anything left in the trust can go to the other two kids if that's what you want to do. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So really, that's a great way to take care of everybody and everybody's needs.
Yes.
A third-party special needs trust, I like SNIT, is one created by someone other than the disabled person, so like a parent, and funded with funds belonging exclusively to someone other than the disabled person, like a parent. And the disabled person cannot be the trustee or direct the distributions. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, are there any limitations in this type of trust on what kind of distributions can be made?
Yes.
And what are they?
That is a big thing with a special needs trust, and you have to be very careful because you cannot just use it for health, education, maintenance, support. This is not used to support the individual.
Okay, so it cannot be used for those things.
Correct. Cannot be used to support them.
Unless I think there's an exception there.
So you're supplementing. You have to think of that. Once they've utilized that, we're really supplementing. And there are very strict laws as far as what you can utilize this money for. But again, it's not to support that individual.
Okay.
They still need the services to support themselves.
And I think you were going to say something, Jen?
There are some limitations on them for things like in-kind support and maintenance. Those are food and shelter. Generally speaking, you never want to make food and shelter distributions from these trusts directly to the disabled individual. I'm jumping the gun a little to talk about ABLE accounts, though. If we have a person who became disabled before age 26, we can create what's called an ABLE account, and that's basically just a bank account in the name of the disabled person. And we can make distributions to that account up to $15,000 per year.
And I'm going to want to go over that again. So let's go back to Magda.
Next is the self-settled special needs trust. So this is where actually the individual who is receiving Medicaid services disabled is actually going to create their own trust. So this could be, unfortunately, inheritance or a lawsuit, and they actually came into money, and now we have to create this trust so that we're protecting the services that they're receiving, and we're putting this money into a self-settled special needs trust.
So let me ask you, where it says created by the disabled person, his parent, guardian, or the court. Now, I'm certainly used to it being created by the parent, the guardian, or the court. How does the disabled person create it?
So, of course, depending on who we're talking about. So it could be an individual who's disabled, but they're still able to communicate, make decisions, but they are still deemed disabled. Then at that point, they can create their own self-settled special needs trust.
So it could be a physically disabled person?
Yes.
It could be a person who perhaps has some sort of brain injury but can still communicate and express their wishes and isn't totally disabled in terms of they don't understand anything.
Yes.
Okay. So go on now.
Okay. So again, it's very similar to a third-party special needs trust. So in essence, we are gathering the funds that we're going to place in this trust, and we are pulling everything together and putting it in the trust where, again, this individual is now protected. They are still going to be receiving the services. This is going to hold the funds.
Meaning Medicaid services.
Yes, Medicaid. And the funds that, if this was an inheritance, so mom and dad unfortunately didn't plan accordingly, but they left $500,000 goes to this child. So now we have to go to court to pull these funds together. We'll say $500,000. They belong to this individual, disabled, but we need to go to court to create this special needs trust since it wasn't done ahead of time. With this type of trust, there is that payback provision though.
Okay, and that's important. So what you're saying there is when that person passes away, any funds that the government had used for them has to be paid back. Is that correct? Or does anything in that trust, anything that's left over, go back?
So whatever the government paid out for them.
Okay.
So of course it is specifically written in that trust that when they pass, whatever the government has paid out will go paid first.
The excess then could, if there was an excess, which probably there wouldn't be, but if there was an excess, it could then go to whoever the person who created the trust names. Is that right?
So it's usually the heirs at law. So
Oh,
whoever
okay.
their heirs are,
The heirs of...
the disabled individual.
Okay. All right. And then there's the same requirement here that the disabled person cannot be the trustee.
Correct.
But there's another requirement. What is that?
So they have to be under the age of 65. That is another big thing because I know we heard that in court. Well, I have an 80-year-old. What can we do? And it's unfortunately they have to be under the age of 65 if we are going to do anything like this.
What's the reasoning for that?
That's just the law.
Okay. We don't have nobody.
I don't know if Jen has a more elaborate reason, but unfortunately I don't know of a more elaborate reason other than they picked 65 as a good number.
The general reasoning was we didn't want to do it for people who had planned for their futures, then needed nursing home care so that they couldn't just take the money that they'd saved for their retirement and put it into a special needs trust. They wanted it to be for people who became disabled while they were working or in their childhoods so that they could get out of the cycle of poverty that disabled people tend to live in.
Okay. All right. So I just, again, like I did on the other one, want to go over the slide. So this is the self-settled special needs trust, again, which is different than a third party because the third party, someone else is creating it for you. Here you're creating it for yourself. Is that right?
Correct.
And it holds funds that belong to the disabled person, but a big difference between the third party special needs trust and the self-settled special needs trust is the self-settled requires that the government is paid back all the money that they have paid for the benefit of the disabled person. And if somebody reminds me, I want to just talk about MERP because that's a similar concept there. The disabled person can't be the trustee. That's the same thing. And the disabled person must be under 65. That's a difference. Correct? Okay. And again, both of these are created so that the disabled person can still receive governmental benefits. They're not kicked out of their programs, but they have money basically set aside for them that can make their life better. That money can be used for them to make their life more enjoyable. Is that right?
Yes. Correct.
Okay. I think we go on to the next slide if we can get this button to work.
Okay, and I think we were going to actually segue here since we were talking about self-settled trust.
That's right, to the
able accounts. We're going to go all the way back there.
Now Jen's up.
I really get excited about these ABLE accounts because they're very cool things. We talked about that limited distribution standard where we can't pay for food and shelter for the disabled person.
And let's talk about that for a minute. So explain that. You can't do that because
if we pay for food or shelter, so the trust makes a distribution to pay the disabled person's rent, for example, they're going to take a hit on their benefits. If that hit is big enough, it can kick them off of the benefits entirely. If we're paying those funds to pay for the disabled person's rent, they will reduce the disabled person's benefits by at least 1/3.
And is that because the trust itself says that it can be used for rent and these various things?
No.
Okay.
It's because the Social Security Administration's rules say if anyone pays for a disabled person's rent other than the disabled person himself, we are going to reduce their benefits.
So the disabled person has to pay for their rent out of the benefits they receive.
Mm-hmm. Their food and shelter costs. Food is pretty obvious, food. Shelter is rent, mortgage payment, homeowner's insurance, electric, gas, water, sewage.
Now, what happens if their benefits don't cover all of that?
This is where we sort of have a problem, right? In a third-party settled special needs trust, we may make the distribution for that purpose if the trust permits, but we've got to know we're going to cost the disabled person part of their benefits. In a self-settled, you cannot make the distribution for that purpose, regardless. It's always a good idea not to. So what we do instead is, if our disabled person became disabled before age 26, we can create an ABLE account for them. Anybody can put money into an ABLE account up to $15,000 per year. So our third-party settled or self-settled special needs trust can pay money into the ABLE account. The ABLE account is the disabled person's money. It just statutorily is, in a way that the third-party settled and self-settled special needs trusts aren't. The disabled person has control over it. And what that means is, if the disabled person then uses that money to pay for his own rent, well, that's his money. He paid his own rent. So it's a way that we can take a stepping stone, sort of, and bridge it between those trusts that we've set up for that person and that person himself, so that we don't have a diminution, a reduction in their benefits. $771 a month is the maximum Social Security benefit that the disabled person can be receiving on these kinds of benefits. And reducing that by a third to bring them down to something like $450 is hard to live on. The ABLE account can let us not have that reduction in benefits and still give the disabled person enough money to live on each month.
So you should set up one of the two types of trusts we were talking about. That trust should then give the disabled person $15,000.
No, the trust gives the money to the ABLE account.
Okay, and who sets up the ABLE account?
The disabled person, if he or she has the capacity to do it, the understanding to be able to do it, but otherwise a parent can set it up for them, a power of attorney, a guardian, any of those people can create that account.
And is it just simply by calling it an ABLE account, it becomes that vehicle?
These ABLE accounts are administered by each state. Texas has an ABLE account set up, but so do a number of other states. So the person can look around, find which program is best financially for the person, and then set one up. We've mostly been using the Ohio accounts called Stable. We've mostly been using those because of their investment, but Texas has its program set up now. It's new, and so we can set it up. Each disabled person can only have one ABLE account, though. It can't be that each of your parents sets it up and the grandparents set one up, so that we've got all of these different ABLE accounts. We set up one ABLE account for a disabled person, and then any person can contribute to it. But now that they've contributed to it, it's the disabled person's money.
And again, I guess it's the law, it's written into the statute that they can have that $15,000. Is that the maximum amount that can be in the ABLE account, or that's the maximum amount that can be contributed by an individual?
That's the maximum amount that can be contributed to the account per year.
Oh,
but
per year. Okay.
It's exempt up to $100,000. So generally speaking, you could contribute $15,000 to it per year. If the person only used $10,000, then in 10 years, you'd have $100,000. All of that's exempt.
Exempt from what?
From counting towards the person's $2,000 resource limit. The
Wow.
reason we're setting up any of these accounts, any of these trusts, any of these ABLE accounts, is because our disabled person has a $2,000 countable resource limit.
Right. From Medicaid.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we're trying to make sure that we've got things that are in non-countable resources, exempt from counting.
Right.
As all of these trusts and the ABLE accounts are.
So, but if you set up, and that's why I wanted you guys on here, because I don't understand this, and I want you to explain it to me and the people who are watching. If you set it up it's in the disabled person's name,
Mm-hmm.
can it be set up in the guardian's name?
It's always set up in the disabled person's name, but if the disabled person himself doesn't have the ability to manage it, we can set it up with a person who can manage it, and that can be the guardian or a
Can it
parent.
be the trustee of the special needs trusts that we talked about?
As long as that person has the right relationship, yes.
And what's that?
Power of attorney, guardian, parent, grandparent. We might look at the various, there's nothing in the provisions that create the ABLE account that say it couldn't be the trustee. So it would be a matter of looking at the state plans. If we know, for example, we're setting up a third-party settled special needs trust like what Magda talked about, where one of your children is going to be the trustee for the benefit of the other child, we might look to make sure that the state plan allows a trustee to manage those funds.
So you have to look at every state plan to determine that.
You look at the state plans that are going to work best. Not every state will allow an out-of-state person to set up a trust.
Right.
Or an ABLE account, I'm sorry. So there's a limited number of states that will allow other state residents to set up a plan. But yes, you want to look at some of the best plans that you can find online and then make sure that it meets your actual needs. Just like establishing any other kind of investment account, you want to look at all of the various requirements for them and the various tools that they offer you.
Okay, so you were talking about in your office, you used the Ohio plan, and you chose that because?
They were one of the first plans that was set up that let us create them for out-of-state residents of their state. Texas only just set up their plan last year, maybe the year before?
I think it was last year.
Last year. So we were always having to use out-of-state plans, but Stable, the Ohio plan, has just been a really good plan investment-wise, and with their requirements, they've been pretty easy to deal with for people. The Texas plan has some good prospects, though, so we might start looking at using that one instead.
Okay. So I'm a little bit confused, though. How do you use the Ohio plan?
For all of these plans, you're going to go online to the state's website, and you're going to create the account online. It's something that you need to be able to access the internet for, but then all of it is done online.
All right. And does it have to be with an Ohio bank?
It has to be with the Stable program or with the Texas ABLE program. I don't know if we're going to call that table, but it has to be done with the state's online program. It cannot be done through any other bank, any other organization. These programs are approved and are reporting properly to the IRS and to the Health and Human Services.
Okay, so do you set that? I'm trying to get the concept of it. So is ABLE like the umbrella, and you set up the ABLE account under that umbrella?
You go to the specific ABLE accounts. There's a whole specific program for each state that has their program in place, and you go to that particular program in their financial institution.
Is there a reason that states don't have it?
It's a pretty new law, so it's a matter of getting the state getting itself in gear to create this whole new program, this whole new thing that they are having to manage for people.
So to create the biggest benefit for a disabled person, it sounds to me what the two of you are telling me is that you create either a third party or a self-settled trust, and then from that trust, you contribute $15,000 a year to the ABLE program. Is that right? Does that create the biggest benefit?
The best way is to create third-party settled special needs trusts first. They're always better than self-settled special needs trusts. For the reasons Magda said.
Right.
They have no payback provisions.
Right. So let's talk about that. You have the third-party special needs trust, but once you establish that, is it then the best practice to have that special needs trust deposit the $15,000?
Not necessarily all $15,000. We want to deposit up to $15,000. That's the maximum.
Right.
But we only want to contribute as much as the disabled person is using, because ABLE accounts, like self-settled special needs trusts, have payback provisions.
Oh, okay.
So we want to hold as much as possible in the third-party settled special needs trust.
Where there is no payback.
Yes, where there is no payback and the funds can, after the death of the disabled person, or if the disabled person stops being disabled and starts having capacity to do things, we can make distributions out of that trust without having to pay the state first and just give the money to the disabled person.
Okay.
But yes, we want to put as much into the ABLE account as the disabled person needs to be able to live on to make that 771 go far enough that they are able to live independently.
Can you, so if you gave $5,000 to the ABLE account, could you then give another $5,000 if that was used up?
Yes.
Okay.
Up to $15,000 per year.
I think you were going to say something.
I was going to say that's why it's so important to pick a good trustee, because the trustee, their role is so important. They're very intertwined with the disabled individual, and they need to know how much does this person need, what are they lacking, and that way they have that balance. And the ultimate goal is to make sure that the disabled person is taken care of, and the trustee plays such a vital role in that.
Absolutely.
Let's go to the next one because I can't believe it. We've been talking. We're running out of time here. I want to try and cover everything today.
Okay.
Jen, this is yours. The pooled trust.
We can go pretty quickly over pooled trusts.
Okay.
Pooled trusts are very similar to self-settled special needs trusts,
Okay.
except that they are administered by a nonprofit organization like the Arc of Texas, which is the primary pooled trust in Texas. Basically, the Arc of Texas has a trust that they've created that's a pooled trust, and then each disabled person joins that trust and gives his or her money to the pooled trust, and then they manage it on behalf of the person. It has many of the same requirements as a self-settled special needs trust. The disabled person must be disabled, must be under 65, has the same limited distribution standards, and the disabled person can't be the trustee. But here, the Arc of Texas acts on behalf of the disabled person as trustee, so they know all of those requirements.
Okay.
And they know how to manage it without accidentally disqualifying the disabled person from benefits.
So I want to read this slide also. It says pooled trust. It has to be joined by the disabled person. It's funded with disabled person's money. It's operated by the Arc of Texas or other pooled trust administrators. What does the Arc of Texas stand for?
I don't have any idea. Magda?
I think at one point it was after I asked the question I'm going to ask, I think it used to be the Association of Retarded Citizens. Now we can't use the word retarded anymore. It's
IDD, intellectual disability.
So I don't know what it stands for now. And actually, this isn't. Statutorily, we cannot use that term. And I think that was a good change because retarded can have a
very negative connotation.
Yeah, very negative connotation. But the pool trust also requires the payback to the state, correct?
It does. It has an alternative that the self-settled special needs trust doesn't have, which is you can decide that after the death of the disabled person, the Arc of Texas or other trust administrator can continue to hold the money, and they can then use it to pay for their costs of administration.
Oh, okay.
So you have a choice there. You can let the Arc of Texas have it, or you can give it to the state. But the disabled person's heirs at law, they like with the self-settled special needs trust, won't get anything until the state of Texas has been paid back.
And you have to be under 65.
You must be under 65.
Well, listen, we're not going to get to the 1301 trust today, so we'll come back and visit again about that. So I'm Bob Warwick, and I want to ask you to please join us again for the next episode of The Docket. I just can't believe how quickly this episode has gone, and I hope you all have enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed it. You guys are incredible with how much you know about this stuff, and thank you for teaching me about it.
Thank you for having us.
I'm always happy to have you, both of you. Thank you.